All right. Hello, everyone. Try to get this done before lunch. Make sure we're done on time. My name is Jared Ottley, and I'm an integrations engineer at Alfresco. I've been with Alfresco for about 6 years now. I started off as a solutions engineer, moved into consulting, and then just over a year ago moved into the engineering team. The integrations engineering team is a little bit different than the rest of the engineering group at Alfresco. We try to operate and work as if we were an SI or a partner. So we try not to make any commits to core code. We try not to modify any core code in our stuff. We file bugs just like everybody else. If there's a feature missing, we file bugs for it and try to get it in. We provide patches to code, and sometimes, because we are part of engineering, it makes it a little easier to get stuff in. What we're going to talk about today are what are some of the things that we've done in the last year. We gave a presentation last year about 2 projects that we worked on, the Jive Toolkit and Google Docs. We're going to talk about what the status of those are, some of the other stuff is done, how we use Maven in the integrations team, and then we're going to talk about the Google Docs integration that was released on cloud yesterday and then rolled back not because of us, but because of something else. But we'll talk about some of the stuff that we learned as we did and worked on that one. As I said, we started just over a year ago. This is a brand new team at Alfresco, just over a year old, and it started with me. We then, a few months after, added a project manager, Peter Monks, who is also a project manager just over ecosystem and platform in general for Alfresco. And then Will Abson moved over from the solutions engineering team onto it. And most of everything that you see whenever it comes to UI, if it looks pretty and works well, it's because of Will, not because of me. I'm not a front-end engineer. Some of the projects that we've worked on over the last year are the Google Docs integration. This is version 2 of the Google Docs integration. It was available yesterday on cloud. Will be available again soon on cloud. We're targeting, I believe, it's either 4.2 or 4.1.2. I don't remember the release date for enterprise, and then it's also available on community. We've also taken some of the stuff that had been part of the core of Alfresco, and we've been moving that stuff out, either as community projects or taking full ownership of those. And some of those things are like the Hyperic plugin for Alfresco is now a community project, though it does only work for enterprise. Doesn't work against the community product. We also own the Kofax integration, an XAM connector, an S3 connector, which will be released soon. I don't know a specific date. We're also working on the Salesforce integration. Again, the Jive Toolkit, Dropbox Connector. We've also been working on Spring Social Dropbox, Spring Social Google Docs, and Spring Social Alfresco. And if you're interested about Spring Social, I'm going to do a lightning talk on that after lunch. And we've done some contributions. We've contributed the Oauth 1.2 persistent service into community and to the enterprise product of Alfresco. We've made contributions to the PDF toolkit, Share Extras, the Maven AMP plugin, a Java cores filter, the Welsh language pack, the Share Import Export Python scripts, the Ubuntu Quick Start scripts. Last week at the Berlin hackathon, we did a WordPress Alfresco plugin and an Alfresco community to cloud migration utility. I didn't get to participate in the hackathon this time, but Will worked on a new interface for the wiki component in Share. And we're doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So beyond just the normal projects that we focus on, we try to be good members of the community and participate, offer code back as much as we can. All right, what does the future hold for us? So right now, our major projects that we're working on are the S3 connector, Salesforce integration, and trying to make sure that Google Docs, which is finished through QA, is getting out the door, out for everything else. But the future is pretty fluid for us. Once we commit to a project, we're on that project. And right now for us, that is the Salesforce integration. So we expect that there will probably be a lot of stuff that comes out this next year. We'll just have to wait and see what gets planned for us. All right. First, we're going to talk quickly about the Jive Toolkit. Now, the Jive Toolkit is a set of pre-built components that allows you to be able to take content in Alfresco and be able to socialize that to Jive, or content that's in Jive, and be able to bring that back into Alfresco. The content in this integration resides within Alfresco. So even though the content appears to be in Jive and is indexed by the Jive server and searchable by the Jive server, it's all exists within Alfresco. This was released this last spring of this year, and its current supported version is 105 and is available on Alfresco 341, which I think is the latest service pack we have of that. And it's available in the support community. For the 1.1 release, we decided that we wanted to release this out to the community to help get a little bit more traction around the project. So it is available currently on Google Code from Alfresco, for Alfresco 4.1. This project is going to be owned and maintained primarily by Solution Set, which is was our partner in developing this project, and it is looking for help. If this is something that's interesting to you guys, we're looking for developers, testers, users of the project, and additional help on writing documentation for it. Next is the Dropbox Connector. And what this connector is it allows you to be able to take content that resides or exists within Alfresco and be able to push this to an individual user account or an individual user's Dropbox account. It allows a single piece of content to be pushed to multiple users' accounts. So one user could come and sync it, and another user who has access to that content can also come in and be able to sync that out to their Dropbox account. Beyond just syncing an individual file, so every time that file is updated within Alfresco, the file would also be sent out to the Dropbox account. It also supports syncing of folders as well. So once you've synced a folder, any content that is added to that folder is also synced out to that user's Dropbox account and across all of those accounts. It supports manually being able to update content. So within the Alfresco UI, be able to go and click an option, I believe it's Get from Dropbox, and be able to update that content back into Alfresco. So if there were changes or content added into a folder that had been synced out, any of that new content within that folder would be synced in. Any changes from that content would be synced in with that one. It's available on Google Code. It is a community-supported project, and it requires at least Alfresco 4.1 or 4.2. And we'll talk about some of the reasons for that when we talk about Google Docs and some of the new functionality that was added there to be able to support that. One of the things that we were trying to do with that, or trying to do with have the Dropbox connector to make it a real client, make it a real integration for Alfresco, is work on the issue of sync. When it comes to integrations with Alfresco, the two things that we think are most problematic or that we have to address every time are authentication and synchronization of content across services. Authentication, that's something that we can possibly get to and be able to get a handle on over time as we develop more integrations, and we have to deal with other authentication sources or authentication protocols for talking to other systems. And so we can get a general pattern of which we can use to do that one. One pattern that you see is in the Jive Toolkit, which uses a special encrypted header to be able to pass user or specify the user that's being used between the systems. With Dropbox and with the Google Docs integration, we're able to use Oauth to be able to do that. Now, the problem that we have when we talk about sync with Dropbox comes down to, one, a limitation on the side of Dropbox. Let's see if we can tell that one. Well, I first talked about the one-to-many problem with that one. The first problem with Dropbox is that this is not a one-to-one sync between one piece of content that exists within Alfresco and then syncing it out to one source or one location. So we have a one-to-many problem because we have many users who can sync that content. Now, this is not unsurmountable. This is a problem that we can have, but we then have a problem where we need to be able to maintain or manage those. This would be easy to solve with Dropbox if Dropbox had additional functionality or exposed functionality through their API like they have in their UI. One of the functions that they have in their UI is the ability for you to be able to share a piece of content with another user. Through the API, they don't provide that functionality. And if we had that functionality, it would be easy for us to be able to maintain sync between one account and then let Dropbox manage the harder part of maintaining the sync of content across all of their users on that side when we're doing that. The next problem they have is versioning. Dropbox has very poor support for versioning. a revision is created with every save that happens within that content. Now, whether that save happens or when that revision is created may be in real time, or it may be postponed because of the user is offline. And so that revision date may not be in sync with when it actually occurred. Revisions are only available for the last 30 days. And that's general across all of the free Dropbox accounts. If you have a paid account, you have the ability then to install an add-on called Rat Pack, which allows you to be able to keep versions for a longer period of time. But there's no way of us knowing whether or not they have that installed or not. And so we have only a limited history for the past 30 days of the revisions or the versions to be able to go through and look at. Revision numbers in Dropbox are also non-sequential alphanumeric strings. They're 6 to 7 characters long, and there's no way to be able to predict what the next version is going to be or what the past version was based off of that number. Though there is a revision API where you can go back and look at those, there's not always a direct correlation when you're trying to work through those and then be able to match those across multiple users. And as we said earlier, because a modification date may have happened when it's actually synced and not when that user actually made the modification, that also makes that. And then the one-to-many problem plus this versioning problem causes a real nightmare. When it comes to file changes within Dropbox, Dropbox does provide a Delta API, which gives you the ability to say or know when something has happened to content. Dropbox, like us, wants to be thought of as a source of all truth around that content. And so that can cause a problem when there's 2 sources of truth for that. But also causes a problem whenever you look at what this Delta API provides. The Delta API provides basically returns back 2 fields in a collection. The first is the file name and the path to that file within Dropbox. The second is an optional field which may or may not contain the metadata for that file at the time of that change. If it does have metadata, it means that the file is new, it's been updated, it's been moved, it's been copied, or it's been renamed. And there's no indication of which one of those occurred. If it has no file metadata, that means it's been deleted, it's been moved, or it's been renamed. It's very difficult for us then to be able to know when or what has happened to the state of that content when it's being moved from one place to another, especially since there's no way for us to be able to associate within Alfresco a unique ID on that file whenever it's for the case of it being moved to a different location. The other problem with file changes is that all of this is happening as polling. And polling is very expensive. And when you already have limited resources whenever you're working on files or working with content within Alfresco, because of all the other I/O type operations that you have to do, this becomes very costly and can cause lots of problems. Now, if we look at a use case here for this content, if we have a node, if we have a document, and we have a group of users who are either in an office or they're remotely located or they travel a lot, we see an instance where that file can be synced out from Alfresco to their individual Dropbox accounts. Now those users can also then start making revisions or changes to that content. And we have to be able to get those back in. And we have to be able to go in and be able to say in what order those changes occurred within those. And so we have to look at the revision history. We have to look and see, based on the information that we have about it, when we store this revision number, we have to look at the modification date for the content and try to order that content in the right order. And also guess or look at these file operations and try to see if we can understand what happened. So that leaves us with very little options or complicated options whenever we need to be able to do that. So what we're looking at doing for this is creating an out-of-process application that sits alongside of Alfresco, that communicates with Alfresco using as a CMS client to find out about the content or what content has been synced in Dropbox. It also then acts on the other side of it as a RESTful client to Dropbox to be able to make those queries and be able to get information about that content or get that content from Dropbox. and then take in the complicated ordering of that content. What we've had a conversation in Berlin after, towards the end of the conference, and instead of trying to look at being able to resolve these conflicts, what we'll end up doing is looking at a way to be able to notify the user that there is a conflict that has occurred with their content, and then have them solve the problem. In many cases with integrations, when it comes to conflicts within content, it's very difficult for us to be able to say or resolve those problems programmatically or resolve them ourselves. And so the best solution is to push it to the users for them to be able to go and say, this is what has happened with my content. All right. Next is Maven. How many of you got a chance to attend the Maven talks? We had one yesterday and one today. Greg did. Dick. Okay. Maven is what we have chosen as a standard for all of our build process within the integration team. All of our integrations will use Maven and not Ant, which is what the core product is built with. We currently use version 304 or 305 of the Maven Ant plugin. We don't use the larger set for building our integrations with Alfresco. To do this, you can add in into your POM or to your settings or settings.xml file one of these blurbs. The first one here is for the actual 304 release. This one is for the snapshot for the 305 release. The 305 had a bug in it with the file mappings.property file where there was an S where there shouldn't have been an S, and that fixes that problem. That really becomes an issue if you have modifications or changes that you need to make to your web.inf file, or your web.xml file, and anything that goes in the web directly under that webinf directory. All of the Alfresco dependencies for community or enterprise can be found at artifacts.alfresco.com. So if you're an enterprise developer or you're developing against enterprise, you can get the back. I'm trying to remember how old we go back. At least I know you have 3.4 in there, and you also have all the artifacts for 4.0 that are available in there as well. The other thing to add to your pom.xml file is the packaging declaration of AMP. Normally in Maven, you might do it as a jar or war. That AMP plugin gives us the ability to build or develop an AMP file in our packaging process. Now to use the plugin, and this is good for either the repository-based AMP file or a share AMP file, you can declare your use in the plugin section of the AMP file that you want to use. This section right here helps you be able to get the correct files or correct directories in the right location in your AMP file for the repository. You'll want to exclude this in share because we don't have the same sort of dependencies or file structure that is needed in share AMPs. You'll also want to use, for any of your client-side JS files, you'll want those to be minified. So this section right here, whenever you get the slides, look at the slides, this right here will provide that minification for you for your content. So you don't have to worry about that anymore in your code. It can all be done in your build process for your content. Next is the directory structure that you use in Maven. The module.properties files now will sit at the root level of your directory right alongside your pom.xml file. Then we have a source directory, a test, and then you have your Java in your resources file. Those actually should be under test. I don't know why they got moved out there. In your resources, Java is pretty self-explanatory. That's all your Java code. Your resources directory, this is where all of the config files will go for all of your content, or for your plugin into Alfresco, except for the module.properties, which is just about the AMP file. And then you also have a directory that you can create called web app, which allows you to be able to make the modifications or changes that you need in the web.xml file. Now, to build, it's pretty simple. Maven clean package, and you can use either use the skip test parameter if you need to skip through the tests that might need to be might be run. The AMP, whenever it's built, ends up in the target directory. And if you want to validate the content or what the file structure that's found in your AMP file, you can go in. There's a directory under there of the same name as your AMP file that just minus the extension. All right, now on the Google Docs. How many people have used or tried to use the version 1 of the Google Docs integration? Okay, handful. How painful was it? Pretty painful? Sort of painful? Okay, so this was a complete rewrite because we felt that it was pretty painful. We tried to use it internally and it didn't work all that well for us. So this is a complete rewrite focusing on the usability and the functionality of this. This no longer requires a shared account. This is an individual account that you can use, so you no longer have to have everybody saving all of that content into one user account. It's all saved to that individual's Google Docs or Google Docs account on Google. This means that they can create and edit their content in their own account. It gives you a level of security so that you're no longer putting content out into the shared directory, which may need to have been secured towards other users. Google is used solely as an editor and is not used, or it shouldn't be used as a persistence layer. This is not a checkout process where you're putting the content into your Google Docs account where you can sit there and use it. Its life cycle should be limited just to the editing of your content, though that editing session can be long as part of that. We are releasing this as an add-on, so it's not as part of core. So as there are bugs or new features to this, this can be released separate from the core product. And that's the way we're going to follow with most all of our integrations, is that all of our changes to these can be independent of the core product and have their own release cycles. And the Google Docs integration is going to be available here in cloud. It will be available in enterprise and its community. My note to talk about Google Drive. When we started this, the Google Docs, or the document list API from Google version 3, which is the latest, was in beta. And after we finished our QA, it was deprecated in favor of Google Drive. At some point in the future, we will look at moving from using the document list API to moving the Google Drive API, which will have a whole set of new functionality or new features that are added in on top of it. How the user experience, though, should be seamless. It should not be any change to how the user is able to use it. Though there may be new functionality, like in Google Drive where you're able to add new menu items, where the user will be able to go and say, may have an option for them to be able to go and do things like be able to take a document that already exists, a legacy document that already exists in Google Drive, and be able to send it into Alfresco for management. All right, so let's do a little demo of this. First thing I want you to notice is that I am using the Google Docs integration right now. This whole presentation was written and used using the Google Docs integration. Found it to be pretty seamless and easy to be able to use. Part of the presentation functionality within it is also to be able to run presentations directly from it. So let's move out of that, and we're going to move over to, we're going to try to resize this somehow. Might need to, all right, not too bad. All right, let's move this out of the way though. Okay, so as we talk through this, a lot of the information that we'll see or you'll see in this will also be part of in the slides. You'll be able to get further detail. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's move back first. All right, so here's our document list. We needed 2 new features and 2 new set of functionality that needed to be added into Alfresco to be able to support this. The first one we'll talk about is the create content menu. How many of you have tried to add new menu items to the create content list? A couple? It's a pretty painful experience, pretty difficult, not very clear. At least it wasn't always very clear to me. So one of the new features that we added in was, just like with the document library actions that you have over along the side of the document library, you now can do XML declarations of new items that are going to show up here. So just like, and there are some limitations that we're working through on that one, but this allows you to be able to, just like with document library actions, you have 3 options. You can do a page link, which is into a page which is in Alfresco, a link, which is an external, go to an external thing from Alfresco, or you're able to reference a JavaScript element within that one. So that's what those do. It also supports permissions, so you can set or use permissions on that. So does the user have the ability to write into the folder that you're currently in? You can set that one. It does not support evaluators, and that's a discussion that we're having with the engineer who helped us implement this. And so you can't use evaluators just like you use with document library actions with that. The other part that we needed whenever we did this, when we had this, is to be able to persist. Let's see if we can make that go away. Is to be able to persist the OAuth tokens within Alfresco. For Cloud Sync, or for the hybrid sync within Alfresco, they implemented a new service that allows you to be able to store the credentials needed to be able to access a user's account in cloud. It was built as a larger framework that allows us then to be able to plug in other authentication type sources that we can then persist credentials for users. So there is two new services. There's the OAuth 1 credentials store service and the OAuth 2 credential store service, which allows you to be able to persist OAuth tokens into Alfresco. And those can either be shared tokens, or they can be an individual personal tokens that are persisted into to those. Those shared tokens then can be used by multiple users to be able to access a service that's behind a set of OAuth authentication, and the personal ones are just for that user. And those are stored on the user's node. They're encrypted so that no one should be able to access those. The administrator wouldn't be able to access and be able to see those tokens. They support a set of CRUD operations throughout those, being able to create those tokens on those. That's not actually going in through the OAuth dance to be able to get those tokens, but that is being able to create the resource of the node to be able to persist those. You'll be able to update those, you'll be able to delete those, and of course you'll be able to read those. Now, when we go and we do something in here, well, let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and create a new piece of content. I've already authenticated into Alfresco, so there's already a trust relationship between Google and Alfresco in this. So we're going to go ahead and create a new document. In this, we have 3 options within the UI. We wanted to be as unobtrusive as possible, so this is just a quick little bar across the top within there, and the body itself is embedded as an iframe. There's some authentication issues that we had to work around with that, and so the iframe was the best way to be able to provide that content, not being able to just lay that content using some sort of inline capabilities. So our 3 options here beyond the normal editor that we see is that we have this back button, which just takes us back into the repository, back to the document library view within Alfresco. We have a discard changes and a save to Alfresco. Discard changes is just that. Any changes that have occurred occurred to the document, when you click discard changes, that will take the document back to the state it was prior to going into editing. If this is a new document, it will remove the document from Alfresco. And then the save to Alfresco, what that will do is just what it says. It'll save the document into Alfresco. It'll give you versioning capabilities with that document, so you'll be able to say what version of the document this is and be able to provide comments around that content. When the document is saved from Google Docs back into Alfresco, or Google Drive back into Alfresco, that will then remove the document from your Google Drive. So it will no longer be there. While the document is in there, you have the full set of functionality that you would normally have within Alfresco, or within Google Docs. So, you saw my spelling errors, so give me that red line. This is a test. Here, let's see. Rich McKnight is over there. We're going to do something fun with Rich. You got your email open, Rich? I'm going to share this document with Richard. There we go. Oh, you're going to have to remind me of your Richard. I can't see that. Richard. McKnight at alfresco.com. And he can edit. And I want to be able to see less of it. I'm going to guess that green button is the one that I want. So Richard should be receiving an email. Okay? All right. And then I want to be able to get out of this page. Oh, yay. We're going to tab through and kind of, okay, I did that. Done. Hopefully you got that email and that didn't just cancel it within it. So in a minute here, we'll should be able to see, well, after he gets the email, we'll be able to see that he shows up here, and we'll have collaborative editing within the document. Now, collaborative editing is just during the editing session of Alfresco. Once you share that document with another user, you'll be able to see the functionality or see what they have during that session, be able to edit that. Once the document is saved back into Alfresco, because we're deleting that document, that URL, that permission that you've given to that user no longer exists. So you can give temporary permission to a user to be able to edit the document within Alfresco. You get the email, Richard? All right, let me try again. Maybe, no, okay. Hopefully. Share and save, please. All right, done that, so we can just do that. Done. Okay. Hopefully it'll show up here. So along with just this functionality that we have, you also have the ability, we do honor and support any changes to this. All documents currently, whenever you create them to do the least common denominator, they're all created as Office 97 documents. We do support DocX, so all the Office 2000 formats, along with some other formats, and we'll talk about those in a second. Did it show up, yes or no? If not, it's okay. No email? All right. That's all right. Okay. We'll do that another time. So let's just save this document back into Alfresco. So it's going to save it the first time we save it, because this is a new document. This is the first time versioning is being saved to the document, so that's there. Oh, now you got it. Just my luck. Okay. Well, let's resume editing. Well, let's edit a different document then. Let's just grab this text document. So here we have an edit in Google Docs option. So any document or any content that we can edit, Google Docs can only edit or provides editing for a small subset of content. So we have an evaluator here. We actually have a chain of evaluators, and we'll talk about this in just a second. We have an evaluator here that looks and sees what is the possible list of content that we support or that can be edited with Google Docs, and then be able to round trip that. Now, Google Docs actually supports 4 types of content if we go from a content layer. And let's actually move this through, and maybe the editing will go a little faster. Get that email to Richard. Is that they support a document, they support a spreadsheet, they support a presentation, and they support a drawing. Now, drawings, one second here. Richard. Night. Alfresco.com. All right. Okay. And now a drawing within Alfresco only supports one import format type, and that is application / XMS meta file, which is a specific vector file that's the file format of images that are stored within Office documents. What we wanted to do, so you can see here Richard is able to edit that content. So all of that stuff is still supported within Alfresco. One of the things we wanted to make sure is that when we have that list of evaluators is that we want to make sure that content, whenever we go to edit it, once it's saved back into Alfresco, we can keep that chain. We can do a complete full round trip of content into Alfresco. And so we had to make some decisions and choices on different types of file formats that we wanted to be able to support. So one of those is that we don't support drawings. Now that would have been a really cool feature to be able to have in there, but we had to remove that functionality because there's not many people who have editors that can create that type of file. And once you've created that file, if you've made a mistake on it, now you have to take it out of Alfresco, bring it into something else to be able to edit the file that supports JPEG or PNG, and be able to bring that back into Alfresco as part of that process with that one. So there we see Richard's changes that have occurred. Okay, and now I want to save those changes back into Alfresco. Here we see our version. Richard's changes. Okay. Now one thing that should occur as we're doing this is that we're going to get a concurrent editors warning. What this is doing is it's looking to see how many people have made edits or changes to that document within the last 10 minutes, and how of them are not the editor. That's an arbitrary value that can be set or changed with that one, but that seems to be the most realistic. Now, what this will do then is that any changes or anything that has occurred that he may be making when we're going to do this will be lost as it saves it back into Alfresco. So let's talk a little bit about our evaluators for our content here. All right. Okay, so we have two actions that show up. Yep, so once you edit, you can see that. And most likely what you probably saw is that it probably said this item is now in the trash. Did you get a warning that said that this item is now in the trash or is no longer available from Google? Okay. Which is expected. All right, so our two actions are here, are edit in Google Docs and resume editing in Google Docs. Our editing in Google Docs looks at a chain of evaluators. The first of those evaluators is looking to see what is the MIME type that like we discussed. Is this a MIME type that is available for us to be able to edit? The next one is size. We had to look at to see what kind of size we can do that. Now Google Docs actually, beyond just the actual physical size of content, looks at a lot of other characteristics. So while a Google document may actually be of may have a specific file size on it, they actually have a character limit as well. So you have to know the number of characters. When it comes to spreadsheets, it came to much more complex things like the complexity of the formulas, the number of formulas, the number of rows, the number of sheets, the number of columns that you have within a spreadsheet. And presentations was primarily all just about size. There is a limit on the number of slides that you can have as well. But we went for the least common denominator in all of those, and that is just the actual physical file size, because all of those other ones require us to be able to do a lot of introspection on the content, which then slows down the user experience for them to be able to know or be able to use that content on that. And then in return just slows down Alfresco in general. The next is whether the content is actually currently being edited or not. What this does is this does a negative value search on whether or not the aspect is there. When I first did the integration, I didn't see an evaluator that did this, that asked whether or not this aspect was on there. And so I just jumped right into Java and wrote one right up. Evaluators are actually pretty easy for us to be able to code. But was pointed out later that the way that you do this is that you put a negate on your evaluator. There's only two examples in the actual code base that show this, and so the developer who wrote the evaluators pointed out my error to me, and so that's what this one actually uses. We also needed to look whether or not the Google Docs service was enabled. Google Docs is enabled or is written as a subsystem. And as it's written as a subsystem, it gives us the ability on the Enterprise Edition to be able to turn that on and off. In the Community Edition, that is just a properties file. So because it's JMX enabled on the Enterprise version, you can turn that on or off on a live system. So we had to be able to look at all of those evaluators. We also had to know what the permissions were on those. And we'll take a quick look at those evaluators here in a second. Trying to make sure. I think we're good on those. Okay. So, and then here, also one of the things that we had to be able to add was the ability to lock the content. The content, because we want to force the user to not be able to edit the content, most checkouts within Alfresco, most locks, whenever you're using share, those are write locks, which means that other users can't write to the content, but you as the owner of that content can write to that content. We didn't want the user to be able to do that, and so we implement these as read-only locks, or as read locks, so that you're only able to read the content. Now that does affect functionality within Share. So you won't see this document show up in the content I'm editing dashlet, because that's a very specific query on the dashlet where it's looking for those write locks. And so we have a bug against the core code to be able to get that fixed. All right, so let's move back in to our demo. So from the demo, okay. Google Docs is implemented. So we have Google Docs, or Google is in the cloud, and we have two parts of that. We have the repository and we have the share side. The share side talks to the repository through a set of web scripts. No CMS is involved in this for this integration. And those set of web scripts be able to provide us things like the authentication, help us go through the OAuth dance, which we'll look at shortly, of how that occurs. It lets us do our different file operations, being able to get content into, telling it that we want content to be saved to Alfresco or exported out to Google Docs as part of the process. The repository side then uses Spring Social Google Docs, which is a Spring Social module that gives us the OAuth side to be able to provide that the authentication functionality, and then also provides a way for us to have an API. And what this one actually does is it wraps the GData client to be able to have that communication. So we didn't have to worry about writing all the RESTful parts of that. There is a Google Spring Social Google project that we looked at using at first, but the problem we ran into that one is that it uses newer libraries for Spring Social, which then caused us problems because of our mandate of not modifying core code, we weren't able to go through and update or change the version of Spring Social within Alfresco. And so sometimes you have to make these options of, you might have to go and write your own code to be able to do stuff if you're not able to modify those core files. We really recommend strongly that you don't modify the jar files that are provided with Alfresco, even if there's a bug fix or there's a new enhancement out there and a new one, and everything seems to work okay. When you go to upgrade, you're going to overwrite that jar file and you're going to lose that functionality and have to go through it. Your users will wonder what's going on. Your integrations may break. And so you have to make some sacrifices and know which libraries you can use within that one. On the share side communicates with Google of just presenting the editor. So there's a special URL that you can use to be able to call and display just the editor, and that's how we get the iframe into that. All right, we talked about this really quickly. The OAuth Credential Store provides token persistence for OAuth 1 and OAuth 2, leverages the remote credential service. As I said, this is something that if you have other systems that you're talking to and you need to be able to persist authentication information between Alfresco and those other systems, you can write your own providers to be able to integrate those. The Google Docs integration uses OAuth 1, and the Google Docs, the Dropbox one uses OAuth 1, and the Google Docs uses OAuth 2. In the slides, and we'll just move to those right here, we show you what the methods are and how you can use those. This gives examples of OAuth 2. OAuth 1 methods are pretty much the same things to be able to do that one. So, and so we'll just move through those really quick. This is an example of the create content action. Again, really easy to be able to do. You don't have to worry about these complex other share config parts that you have to, I think it was a combination of web scripts and share templates to be able to get it to work. You just add this into your share config custom. It's a string compare on the document library and then a create content tag. The things to look at right here are your index, which decides the order of where it's going to appear in the list. Now here's our param name. In this one, we're declaring this as a function, and that's our JavaScript that's actually going to be called that we include into the page. Like we said before, here's a link. The link is The link is past a node ref, and so in that link that you provide, you can put in curly braces the word node ref, and whenever you call or click on that, that's going to pass that node ref, in this case, the node ref of the parent space or the folder in which you're in, to be able to work on that content. And then here's page link. I think I may have told you guys the opposite of that one. Page link is within share, link is outside of share. And then here's JavaScript, the JavaScript one that we talked about. A function is very simple. What it looks like is that you're going to use Yahoo bubbling to register your action. That's our name that we use, the action name that we use. And then you can do make your function call within there and be able to do that. In this case, this is the one that's going to create a Google document of the content type document. Here are our actions that we talked about with those. I think the ones that we want to look at. All right. If you're looking to debug or know what's being passed back and forth between Alfresco and share, to know what's being passed for either property decorators or custom responses, you can look at the node itself. You can get the information. This is the web script that it calls, the slingshot doclab2 node, and then you can pass it the URL. You can also use the debug functionality or the developer functionality within with Chrome. It has very good, so you won't have to look at this. If you use the developer tools and go into network and you actually look for the network call that's similar to this one, you can actually then see the full request and response chain and be able to look at the JSON that's being passed back and forth between those. All right. When we talk about the permission sections that is added into it, here are the permissions that are supported to be able to do that one, of whether or not it should be able to show, whether that the ability to cancel the checkout, change permissions, create children, delete, or write to the documents. So those are the permissions or possible permissions that you can add in whenever you're using defining your action. All right. Talked about a lot of these. Oh. When you're working with the JSON, you're working with custom evaluators, you should remember that and the JSON, when it's passed back and forth, those are passed as doubles and not as ints. Even though they don't look like doubles, they are. The parser looks at them and says that they are doubles. All right. Quickly go through that one. Okay, here's the AMS meta file that we talked about for a second. All right. This is the next one I think we want to talk about. All right, so the Oauth workflow is actually a pretty complicated part within Alfresco. What we've used for this one is a process between so we have the repository. What happens is in this flow is when a user goes to access content or use something within Alfresco, the flow is that the JavaScript within the client-side JavaScript makes a call back to the repository to see whether or not the user has been authenticated. If the user hasn't been authenticated, we then need to generate a special URL that then it can be used by the front-end user to direct the user at to be able to go through and get the special login page. If you've seen or you've done used applications that go and tie back and forth between between an application like Facebook or Twitter and some other third-party client, you have a special login page or a special page that allows you to be able to give permission for that one. That URL is passed back to share, and then we are able to use either a modal window, depending on the browser that's in a modal window, or we open a new window that displays and shows that login page for you. And the whole script process then is paused until a user makes a decision on that, once they've logged in, and then say whether or not they allow or not. The nice thing about the OAuth is that it tells the user exactly what permissions they're granting to the application. And then the user is then able, at some point, could go and revoke those rights as well if they want to. So that then allows them to go to Google. Google, once the user is authenticated, passes back a link at a callback URL, and we're able to pass that information back to the repository so that it can be persisted, and then pass it back to tell the user that the whole process has been able to complete it, and they're able to move forward. So it actually moves pretty quickly. So the components, as we said, are 2 web scripts. It provides the authentication URL, and the other one is that the persistence part of those tokens. On the client side, JS is used to initiate the flow, make the calls to the repo, open that dialog, and then the secret sauce to this is a callback page. OAuth 2 requires that you have a page that is reachable by that browser to be able to send or direct the user back to. So in this case, because we don't know where that user is going to be or going to be able to work with, because we're on-premise, we're in the cloud, that page is actually hosted at alfresco.com, and we'll use that page then to parse the response back and be able to then send that token back on to Alfresco as part of the process. One of the really cool things that we learned while we were doing this is a rollback callback. Early on in Alfresco, when we were using Hibernate, it was difficult once a transaction had failed for us to be able to go and do some other action. Once a transaction failed, it completely rolled back, and you weren't able to do anything with that one. What you can do now, because of the use of Ibatis, is that you can actually have a callback that once a transaction has rolled back, you can have it perform some sort of other set of action, like maybe clean up within Alfresco to another system, notifications, just some unit of work that you're able to do. The code is pretty easy. In our case, what we wanted to do is that there was an exception that was being thrown because of the state of the user's permissions within a site. And we wanted then to go and clean up whatever work they had done, whether it was a document that had been sent out to Google Docs or a new document they created. We wanted to be able to roll back. So what you do is that you create a new listener within Alfresco, and there's this callback as after rollback of being able to do that. And then in the transaction helper, we're able to then be able to say whether or not this is should happen in the transaction, or whether or not this is a read-only operation. So if you're talking to another system, this would be a read-only operation within Alfresco. If you were going to do work within Alfresco, do some sort of cleanup or something within Alfresco, you need that to be to not be a read-only application. In our case, once we had done our unit of work, we just did a throwback. Now, there are other possibilities or other options that you can do if you start looking at that transaction helper and the callback. Things where you can perform actions that occur before commit or after commit. We haven't done a lot of work or test with those to be able to see how safe they are. The rollback is pretty safe, though, and it seems to be a more common case of being able to use that within those. As we said earlier, the Google Docs integration, we also wanted to be able to support JMX. When you're creating or defining your Spring beans, all of your properties that you add into those beans are exposed through JMX, but they're all read-only. And we wanted the ability for the user to be able to do that. And so we needed to create our own JMX or our own subsystem to be able to do that. And there's a couple things that we learned. Well, one is that we were always a little wary of creating a new subsystem, but we found that it was actually pretty easy to be able to do. We define for our bean a child application context factory bean in our AMP, in our modules.context file. And then we have a specific structure that is set up within that, and that's Alfresco subsystems, where you give it a category and then an optional instance of that. And that instance, if you're looking at the JMX subsystems, the instance would be like default. And that's, you don't have to define anything by default. But the category is things like file system, authentication. In our case, it's Google Docs. And there's also, because we also had an existing one, we needed to have an instance. And so there's a category, the category is for ours is V2. Now, we then added into this directory that we created our context file and our properties file. We also believe that it's best practice that your model file, and this is just an example of this, of what that bean looks like to be able to define in your module.context file, is that your model file, your models should also go in your subsystem, because we want to keep that unit of work, all those files together, and not have them spread out. All right? So that's one of the best practices. The other is that if you have web scripts that are provided or as part of your AMP, those cannot be defined in the subsystem. The web script framework is itself a subsystem, and it can't, on a restart or a start, it doesn't know how to how to walk down that chain to be able to start and stop the web script subsystem and be able to bring those web scripts in. And so those would then need to be defined within your AMP. The other thing is to test what happens when your subsystem gets unloaded. Does the functionality or the things that you're seeing what you want the user to experience? One of the things that we saw is that while it is unloaded, when we called the method that then was part of that subsystem, it reloaded the subsystem. And so we have to layer on top of that functionality, or if we're checking to see whether or not the functionality is available, we look at the property and not whether or not the subsystem is actually loaded or available. In our case, we liked that functionality because one of the things we didn't want to is that if a user had been editing content and an administrator came in and turned that off, we want them to be able to go out and be able to get their content and bring it back into Alfresco without losing it and keeping things into a lock. So it's best practice would then be able to go and test those. I think I'm close to out of time. Are there any questions about anything that we talked about? A lot more information in the slides. And if you have questions, you can always catch us in the hall afterwards. Yes? Oh, CMIS. Yes. So one of the things that we've looked at with CMIS, with our integrations, is how viable it is. There are a lot of systems out there that support CMIS, but not all of them, but not enough. And so one of the things that what we try to do is we make sure that when we're building an integration, that we try to contact the company that we're doing to and offer them or try to get that, ask them about doing CMIS. See that the solution set, our partner that helped us build the Jive Toolkit, they were able to go through and add in CMIS functionality. That saves you a whole lot of time because then you're not building a lot of web scripts for basic file functionality within Alfresco. Another best practice with integrations, especially looking at querying, is if you're going to do a query against the system, look at using a CMIS. If you're building a third-party AMP that you're going to, as a solutions provider or that you're going to go and bring to a customer, you might not know whether or not their situation in their environment they're using Solr or they're using Lucene, and those query languages can be different. So if you're writing them, write your queries as CMIS queries, which gives you a good level of portability against them. It's also pretty easy to be able to write external applications to be able to talk to Alfresco. Now, in our example of the Dropbox connector that we're using, all of our file operations are going to be done through CMIS. But because we need to be able to get those credentials, the Oauth credentials, out of Alfresco back to our standalone client and not have it need to have it or store its own set, we have to create a set of web scripts. So CMIS may handle a majority of your file operations within there. There may be some special cases where you need to write a web script or two to be able to handle more Alfresco-specific information or work with content that's not available or exposed by CMIS. If you want content that is exposed to CMIS all the time, you need to make sure that you're inheriting from CM folder or CM document. If you don't, the content is not exposed. There also is opportunities, and we've seen that so far we haven't seen any issues where you may create contentless nodes within Alfresco, and have them be of type CM document, and there's not any real issues with that. It's not something that you would expose to the user through, like if you were using the share UI, you'd want to make sure it was in an area or you made it so it's not visible to the user. I believe you can use syshidden is the property or the aspect that you can apply that makes it so it's not visible to the user in the UI. But you can create those contentless nodes and then be able to use CMIS to be able to access them and then be able to get at properties on those using join queries. You could be able to get the aspects or be able, if it's a file where you're actually going to put key value pairs in it or something like that, you can just then read the file as normal. Any other questions about CMIS? I'm done? Okay, Yoram is saying I'm done. So thank you guys. If you have any other questions, you can find me outside after or throughout the day.